morning, everyone. Welcome to the Muse Virtual Product Showcase. This is optimize the printing structure of your virtual environment, improving security and efficiency through optimized printing at Thibodaux Regional Medical Center. I'm Alicia Roberts with Muse. Before we start today, I have a few announcements just to ensure everyone has a smooth experience. First of all, you are all muted. You are in the listen-only mode, so you will need to type any questions you have into the question box, which is located on your GoToWebinar control panel, and this is probably displaying on the right side of your screen. If you have any trouble or questions during the webinar today, please email education@museweb.org, and I will help you with any problems you may experience. We're going to hold questions until the end of the session today, and at that time I'll read them in the order that they have been received. You can also vocally ask your question by clicking the yellow hand icon, which is in the top left corner of your GoToWebinar control panel. If you select this button, that will indicate to me that you'd like to be unmuted so you can be heard to ask your question or make your comment. The session is being recorded today, and at the conclusion of the webinar, I'll send you an email follow-up, and this will contain the link to watch the video recording. Now, this is a product showcase, and Muse International does not endorse any product or service discussed during the showcase. The opinions and beliefs expressed during this program are not necessarily those of Muse International. Our presenters today are Brian Samaha, Network Operations Manager at Thibodaux Regional Medical Center in Louisiana, and Patricia Trum, Director of Sales at Forward Advantage. Patricia, I'd like to turn it over to you now and welcome you as our presenter. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Alicia, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We're really excited to present to you the experience that Brian and the Thibodaux team had with the UniPrint virtual printing solution. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Just a little bit about me. I've been in the healthcare industry a little over 20 years now, focused mostly on integrated multi-application healthcare delivery systems. But most importantly, our guest of honor is Brian Samaha. He has been with Thibodaux Regional for 7 years now. He's implemented over 100 systems and has worked directly with us during this entire process, from evaluating the UniPrint solution all the way through implementation and discussing his experiences with it. I also have on the line, who's going to support us from an additional technical perspective, Chris Bates. He's one of our lead engineers at Forward Advantage and was instrumental in assisting with the implementation of Thibodaux. A brief agenda of what we'll be focusing on. The way we're going to run today's meeting is really an interview type of style, so I'll be asking Brian some questions so that you can hear from his perspective, benefits, the implementation, and takeaways from it. So we're going to talk about the culture of mobility that they were creating at Thibodaux, some of the challenges and technical goals that they had, identifying the right solution, looking at roles-based workflow, the project scope, and then results. And of course, questions, as Alicia had mentioned earlier. So what I'm going to do right now is I am going to once again introduce Brian Samaha. And he has been a strategic player, not only, as I'd mentioned, throughout the evaluation process, but also working with us to put this information together to share with you. So Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about Thibodaux Regional and go from there.
Thank you. Sure, thank you. So Thibodaux Regional, we're located about an hour southwest of New Orleans, Louisiana. We have a 188 licensed bed. We're at an acute care facility which provides inpatient and outpatient care for the people of Lafourche Parish and the 7 surrounding parishes or counties. A little bit about the EMR we use. We have the Meditech client server 5.6. We'll actually be going to 5.6.7 Saturday, 5.6.7 platform, and we have about a little over 120 active medical staff, around 1,200 employees. So we specialize in heart surgery, women's neurology, neurosurgery, just to name a few of kind of the specialties that the hospital focuses on.
Thanks, Brian. Fantastic. And can you describe a little bit about the virtual infrastructure that you were implementing at Thibodaux?
Sure. So back in 2012, we actually rolled out a Citrix virtual application environment. We did that on the cusp of CPOE for our physicians. We wanted to be able to stream our applications to the physicians anywhere and have them roam with them. And so back in 2012, we did that along with single sign-on. And so this particular project was to grow that process and to make it better, to obviously fix the issues that we encountered. And some of our goals were to gain stability, both in the environment itself and then especially with printing, and just overall to make it better.
Wonderful, Brian. I'm going to see, I want to make sure that you can see my screen because it just said that there was an issue with the GoToMeeting. So Brian and Alicia, can you still see everything?
I see the Thibodaux Regional slide.
Okay, so there is a technical issue. What I'm going to do is I'm working on that technical issue. I am going to ask you, Brian, you ran into some challenges with printing in your virtual environment. We don't have the challenges up on the screen because we are going to go through and figure out our technical issue, but some of those things were,
sure.
Let's see, we had failing print jobs, printers not recognized, security risk because of jobs printing in the wrong location, resource of IT teams to manage and maintain your printing, help desk calls. Can you give us some additional detail about how challenges such as with the virtual environment you were working with, how it was disrupting your provider workflow,
Sure.
and how that affected the IT team?
So it's never good when a physician directly calls the help desk, I don't think, especially when they're trying to get in and out of the hospital. So unfortunately, prior to our new system using Uniprint and VMware View, we actually, unfortunately, pretty commonly had, I'd say, 2 or 3 times a week, the physicians themselves call our help desk, expressing frustration that they were unable to consistently print, whether it be from Meditech or whether it be from another application. So obviously there's lots of technical reasons why that was the case, but we knew that we needed to get that fixed. Our goal was to make printing a non-factor, and that is something that we've been able to accomplish. Unfortunately, I think printing can often be an issue because it's one of the few times that you're taking something digital in our world and trying to turn it into something physical. So obviously that was an issue for our providers, which was a big issue for us, especially when we were trying to get them to go ahead and enjoy using the computer, or maybe not enjoy, but at least accept using the computer, which is always can be an issue. So we wanted to make printing a non-factor for our physicians and providers, and obviously we wanted to cut down on the number of help desk calls as well. When you get a call that comes into the help desk that a doctor can't print something he needs, that can obviously disrupt the flow of the day and kind of becomes a priority.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Brian, I'm going to ask you one more question, and while I'm still trying to get up, I'm also going to ask Brittany. I just sent you the presentation, and if we can get presenter rights over to Brittany, we can still talk through the slides and we can have it up and running on the screen for everybody to see. So Brian, can you talk a little bit about the resources it took to maintain your printing environment?
Sure. I mentioned that just a second ago. Again, there's lots of technical issues behind the scenes that I won't get into, but it often before implementing VMware View and Uniprint, it would be things like having to manually install print drivers on the Citrix server. A lot of times the protocol wouldn't properly pass through the printers, so oftentimes we would get calls, not necessarily from inside the hospital because we had all of those taken care of, but if we had physicians accessing it from home or from their office, we would have to actually figure out the drivers that were needed and install them on the Citrix server. So that was a problem, obviously, for the user who was trying to use it, and then also, again, for our admins and for our help desk. We also, I think, we took a ding on user trust. They didn't believe that they could consistently print properly. And so, unfortunately, at the time, a few years ago, before we really took a look at this and made it a lot better, we had a lot of doctors continuing to use fat clients. So they would just kind of revert back, not using single sign-on, not using the Citrix application, and they would just simply revert back to using a standard computer, which was not the goal. So obviously, when we were beginning to assess the needs, gaining user trust, gaining that trust back, getting the users to believe in the system again was a priority, along with the desire to reduce help desk calls, and really, obviously, just make printing a non-issue.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for everybody for their patience with us bringing it back up. So we're going to want to be on the slide that had the key challenges, Brittany. And then we're actually going to go to the next slide, which is going to talk about the technical goals. So Brian, as you were evaluating how you're going to optimize your mobile environment and resolve some of these printing challenges, what were the technical goals that you had that you knew you wanted to achieve?
Right. I kind of mentioned them just now. I was a little bit ahead of myself, I guess. But number one goal was gaining that user trust back. As I mentioned, we deployed the original system back in 2012. Technology got a lot better, and we got a lot better. We learned a lot from that first deployment. So we wanted users to believe in the system again. We spent a lot of time. I personally spent a ton of time on this. And so we wanted to bring them back into the fold, per se. Obviously, not just so that they use this new shiny technology that we have, but really so that they can better take advantage and we get better CPOE rates. You know, we don't have physicians calling in or trying to give verbals, things of that nature. So obviously, with technology, we're always trying to enable a process, and that process was really assisting the provider in using CPOE properly. A second was a solution that was sustainable and maintainable. I kind of hit on this a second, but there was lots of, I'll call it manual effort to keep our system up and running at the time, whether that be server restarts or whether that be installing drivers or whether that be doing different manipulations to the background environment to keep it up and working properly. We didn't want to have to, for instance, reboot the servers every night to make sure that the next day they would work properly. And then the third would be to reduce help desk calls. Obviously, if there's a system that is a problem child, for lack of a better word, that takes a toll on our help desk itself. And so rather than supporting our users, rolling out new technology, et cetera, if we're so focused on one application that the world stops when it has an issue, you know, that takes a toll. So those are our three goals.
Thank you so much. And Brittany, we're going to go to the next slide. And so I know that I was working with you and with Bernie as we were going through the process because you were also looking at a single sign-on solution. And so what I'm going to do now is just give a very brief overview of UniPrint and what some of the functionality is within terms of the solutions and the workflow and the benefits. And then we're going to get right back into your experience, Brian, with the process. So UniPrint Infinity is a complete healthcare printing platform. As you can see up here on the screen in the circle, there's many components. And because organizations are different, you have different workflows, different needs based upon mobile strategy, there's pieces here that are complementary to each other to ensure three things. Number one, security. So you should, in a mobile strategy, no matter what device you need to print from, the role you are in your organization or the location you're at, you want to be able to have your information print for you to where it needs to go. High availability, because we all know in healthcare, downtime is a four-letter word. And high adoption. So depending upon your mobile strategy, you can, as an organization, have your different needs met for workflow based upon your device mix, your different policies, and so forth. So what this means is that your IT team, as Brian has been talking about, they're able to manage and maintain this patented PDF universal print driver printing solution from a universal console. So really that printer management piece being tucked all into one. And that is a vendor agnostic when it comes to your VDI environment. It also means that your clinicians and support staff can print securely and on demand to any printer. So now we're going to take a look at what some of that workflow can look like behind the scenes. Okay, so in regard to workflow, as we'd mentioned, flexibility is pretty key here. The different ways you want to set up can be based upon those workflows. For Brian and the Thibodeau team, they're using the configuration in the middle of the diagram. And at a high level, what it means is when a user prints, UniPrint is converting the print jobs to a PDF format in the virtual desktop section, and then transfers them compressed to the bridge server that serves as the gateway, routing the print job to the correct print queue on the correct print server. There's no requirement for software to be installed on your endpoint devices. Everything's running from that virtual desktop instance, and it means that UniPrint will fit in any virtual environment, no matter what your endpoint strategy is, whether it be Windows devices, Fin0 clients, or even bring your own device. We're going to look at some of the different examples of the workflows that Thibodeau is using in a couple of slides. But also I wanted to mention that based upon your mobile strategy, there is the ability, some folks ask about, well, how can I utilize either an additional security piece to ensure that when that print job goes off, the person who prints it is going to be picking it up at that printer. So as you can see towards the bottom there in the diagram, there is something called a VPAD. And so, for instance, if I was a nurse and I was printing my discharge packet, I would be able to, with this VPAD, which can be connected to multiple printers, based upon workflow, whether it's a password or my ID badge, that's RFID or HID, I can tap it, and it's going to print, it's going to release my print job to the appropriate printer. And also for mobile printing strategies, there are different configurations that allow administrators to quickly and easily convert any Windows print queue into any device-enabled printer, and that they appear as available to the users and integrates with the UniPrint Infinity features such as Secure Print, along with the auditing tools and so forth. So that's just a little bit about the behind the scenes of what can be done with UniPrint. And we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about benefits, and then we're going to bring Brian back into the conversation. So inherently, benefits of implementing UniPrint, whether you're a single organizational entity, such as Thibodeau, or Citizens Medical Center in Texas, or if you're a large IDN, such as St. Joseph's Health or CHI, you're going to be able to see some of these benefits. So document security, knowing that that print job is going to go to the right printer for the right at the right time, whether you're using the traditional workflow or a VPAD. It's going to improve the workflow for your providers because they're going to know that that print job is going to go where it needs to. High availability, reducing that cost and IT burden with the Universal Console and Print Driver, and seamless integration with EHR foreground printing. Brian, we're going to look at the results that you've seen since implementing in a few slides. But one of the things that you continue to emphasize in our discussions as we were preparing for this presentation was you just didn't have to worry about printing anymore. Can you talk a little bit more about that with us?
Sure. So, you know, we often joke, I guess, that we've been deployed on this solution for a little over a year now, and here inside the hospital, we joke that we're not sure if people are even printing anymore. And so what we mean by that is before implementing UniPrint in this new environment, it was, you know, such a manual process, as I mentioned, to keep it up and working consistently and keep the printing working consistently. Really in the last year, I'm trying to think of maybe one call that we've had, you know, specifically related to an issue printing in our VDI environment. And so the fact that it's kind of just working behind the scenes is great for us, especially when you think back to where we came from, where it was I'll use the word struggle, where it was a daily struggle to ensure that our users were able to print properly, consistently.
Fantastic, thank you. And we're going to go to the next slide. And Brian, I'm going to ask you if you can talk a little bit about your relationship with Forward Advantage as it related to understanding and learning about UniPrint and its availability.
Right. So one of the reasons why we contacted Forward Advantage to go ahead and help us with this project, we've been their customer for 10 plus years, so longer than I've been here. Some of the solutions that we've deployed and continue to use today, there's a Communication Director product, like I've mentioned, that's been here longer than I have. And then also now that we have this new VDI system, we're using Imprivata and UniPrint. Forward Advantage, we feel, my CIO and I feel that Forward Advantage is a top resource when it comes to Meditech clients. So obviously everybody wants to know that they're working with someone with experience, and we feel that we have that with using Forward Advantage.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to go to the next slide, and we are going to take a look at workflow. So Brian, we have two workflows that were defined as needs within your organization. We've talked about the flexibility. When I talk about workflows, I want to make sure that I'm being clear for everybody, is that we know that there are times, we've talked a lot about the clinical teams, and actually the two workflows that Brian is going to talk about are for his physicians. But we also know that there's plenty of opportunity when you're thinking about administrative staff or admission staff. They may need to have access to print to multiple floors. We're going to talk about the first workflow, which is going to be a provider that no matter where they roam, that they're able to access the appropriate printer. But then also understanding that we have that second workflow, which is I may be someone who needs to print to different printers, and I may even be in one location or using one specific device. So Brian, do you mind talking a little bit about our first workflow that,
Sure.
that you're utilizing?
So the primary workflow is used 95% of the time, and it's pretty easy. It's basically what we've done is set up printers based off of geographic location. So what I mean by that is if you go and you tap into a computer and you launch your desktop, UniPrint sees in the background where you are in the hospital, for lack of a better word. And for the user, it's as simple as if I want to print to the closest printer to me, then I select Laser 1, which is just a default name. And we've been able to communicate with our users and let them know that the Laser 1 printer is always the closest one to you. Oftentimes our units have more than one printer, and so what we've done is we've set up a second option for them, and Laser 2 would be the second closest printer to you. So for instance, if they're on a Med-Surg unit and they need to print, they tap their badge, launch Meditech, comes up, they select Laser 1, and it prints most of the time right there in the room with them. If they go ahead and suspend their VDI session and walk over to our ICU, they tap in, they're then able to select Laser 1 again to print without doing anything else, and it will automatically print to the closest printer to them right there in the ICU. So prior to this, we actually had physicians learning the names of our printers, which I don't know if that's a good thing when your providers are actually telling you, hey, I need this particular printer to work. So again, this is another win, I feel, because it all works in the background. We're not having to have doctors tell us specifically the printers that have issues. It's as easy as always selecting Laser 1, and Laser 1 is always the one that's closest to them. So that's the one that's used primarily throughout the hospital. Again, I'll use the term geographic-based printing. The other workflow is we have our cardiology group, which those physicians prefer to actually use a cart. and push the cart around the hospital. The majority of them don't. The majority of them go to dedicated terminals that we have throughout the hospital. But this particular group likes to push their cart around. So what we've done is we have set up a list of 10 printers and given them simple names so that the doctor is easily able to just simply select the printer that he wants to send the job to based off of where he is at the given time. And so that's the second workflow. Pretty simplistic workflow both ways. And again, what we're going for is the consistency and ease of use for the users.
Perfect. Okay, we're going to go to the next slide, and I know that many of our customers on the line right now are probably asking the question, what does this type of implementation entail? How long does it take? So what we did was we pulled some of the data on Thibodeau's implementation process specifically, and so we're just going to take a quick peek at it. So there's 3 phases within the implementation: identify and discover that technical infrastructure, really getting into the installation, configuration, and printer mapping. And then phase 3 is IT training, deployment planning, and then the initial end user engagement and training, which heads right into deployment. So a very structured process. The total time for deployment took about 10.5 weeks. It took a little bit longer because we were in the holiday season, but overall, Brian, can you discuss your experience with the training and support during implementation?
Sure, it's relatively straightforward. We had a couple of sessions online with our technicians. And what we actually did is once they trained us, we said, well, we're going to be the ones managing this moving forward, so let us go ahead and set it up and you tell us what we did wrong. So I would say after about an hour and a half worth of training, and they obviously initially set up the server and the software, we actually went in and set the printers up ourselves, and we did that so that we were able to edit in the future. So it was relatively straightforward. It made sense. The user interface was easy to deal with. So I'd say all in all, it was pretty easy.
Fantastic. And then what was your deployment approach? Was it phased, big bang?
Sure. So, you know, obviously we weren't just fixing printing at the time. We were also switching to a new version of Thin Clients, and we were also switching doctors over from Citrix to View. And we were also switching them over to a new type of single sign-on solution. We had something prior to Imprivata that we had been using for a few years. So what we did is we pre-registered our docs for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks prior to deployment in the new system, quote unquote. And so their badges were able to work with our old clients and then also with our new clients. So after about 2 or 3 weeks of pre-registering, we went in and we changed out half the machines, again, just in case there were any physicians we hadn't caught yet. And then maybe 5 days later, we replaced all of them. So I guess it's kind of a phased approach, but that's how we did it, and we feel like it worked well.
Excellent. Thank you. And then we're going to go to the next slide, which is one of the most exciting slides for me, because I know that when we originally started talking, you're like, oh, Patricia, you know, there wasn't a tremendous amount of measurement, but when we asked some specific questions about your experience and what you've seen, you actually gave us some really, really nice results. And so if you don't mind, can you talk about some of the benefits that you're already seeing, especially when it comes to the relief on the IT burden and your provider satisfaction?
Sure. So I've mentioned already that we joke internally about wondering if people even print anymore, and that's because I'll kind of start on that 75% reduction in help desk calls. Not across the board. That would be great if we found a solution to do that, but a 75% reduction in help desk calls related to our virtual environment or our printing. And that's a pretty accurate number. That actually might be a little conservative. The great news is that since we've implemented this system about a year ago, it works well behind the scenes with little management on our part. We've seen about a 25% increase. It may even be greater than that with physicians and clinicians using the system again. I had mentioned, because of the rollout back in 2012, it had some issues. Many of the doctors were going back to fat clients. We've seen a lot of them kind of come back into the fold and see the advantages of using VDI and really see it helping more. And then as far as the greater print job reliability, I may be a little conservative there as well. I would say that might be closer to 90% realistically if I really sat down. But just the fact that, you know, when you press print, it comes out. That's always a good thing. And it sounds simple, but obviously there's a lot of switches that need to be kicked the right way in the background to make that happen 100% of the time.
Awesome. And I also remember from one of our conversations, and forgive me if you already mentioned it, but looking at that 10 different print drivers down to the one, you told me a story about how if a remote facility is wants to bring up a new printer, the research that's involved, and making sure that you've got the driver loaded and compatible. So definitely looking at that from a help as well.
Absolutely. At one point, we actually had to have some of our help desk folks go out to the physician's office and take a look at the printer and really do some research. And again, that's time that, you know, it's not a lot of impact to anyone else except that one person that wants to print. So having that agnostic driver has helped a lot.
Fantastic. Thank you. Brittany, we're going to go to the last slide here. And so, Brian, you've been amazing. You've been amazing to work with from the evaluation all the way through implementation process and of course, helping us prepare for this presentation today. So I thank you so much for that. If you could sum up your experience, if a peer asked you why you chose Forward Advantage and this virtual printing solution, what would you tell them?
You know, at Thibodeau Regional, we try to look for trusted partners that know what they're doing. That's what everyone wants, right? So I would recommend Forward Advantage, obviously, to any Meditech client. That's the only experience I have so far, because y'all are a trusted partner. You do have trying to find the right word right now, and it just left my mind. Sorry. You have a good history, I'll use that, of working with the hospital, you know, for over a decade, longer than I've been here. But it's really your partnership with us and the successful history in the past, which is why we'd recommend, you know, it's.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go to I think we've got one more slide. Miss Brittany. And this is just a shot in terms of at Forward Advantage, the areas that we worked on with you in terms of virtualization and authentication and password management. I'm going to go to the very last slide, and then we are going to take questions.
Okay, Patricia, thank you so much. As we discussed at the beginning of the webinar, you can type your questions into the question box and press send, and we'll read those out in the order they're received. Or if you would rather vocally ask a question or make a comment, you can just click the yellow hand icon. It's in the left top corner of your GoToWebinar control panel. And if you click that button, it will indicate you'd like to be unmuted, and I can unmute you at that time. So we will take questions now. And again, those will just be read in the order that they're received. Okay, so here we go. Related to security, how does Uniprint authenticate the person requesting a document to be printing at a specific location?
Okay, I've got it. And Chris, I know you're there for backup, just in case. So when a user logs onto the virtual machine, they're logging on as themselves. So any print job they create is under their username. The authentication is happening at that login. So when a print job occurs, Uniprint's taking the print job, compressing it, and sending it over that bridge server. It's then going to be routed to the correct print server, and off the job goes. If we're talking about a secure pull printing scenario, we talked about that VPAD device. The user will re-authenticate at that VPAD device via their username and password, a name and PIN, or that badge, and then that job will be released and sent to that printer. Okay. Any other questions, Alicia?
Yes, and this is a good one because I actually was wondering this myself. Does Uniprint ever get bogged down with print jobs and become unavailable?
Great question. So, Uniprint, with the ability to handle thousands of print jobs on a print server, it provides a stable workflow within the hospital. They also have high availability so that you've got that redundancy. If there was ever an issue in terms of quote unquote bogged down, it would probably be at the printer itself. If there were more jobs that are being processed than it can handle out or jam out, it's going to go ahead and it's going to take a couple moments for those print jobs to catch up with that printer, but not from the Uniprint end. Great question.
Okay, so let's move on to our next question. Is this solution usually deployed hospital-wide? And if it's not, what departments would you recommend implementing with first?
Okay, and Brian talked a little bit about this. So anywhere that you have that VDI environment, and if you've had printing challenges in the past, you're going to want to utilize Uniprint there, especially if that VDI environment is already in place. You're going to want to roll it out house-wide. If you're looking at your strategy, you're looking to implement a VDI strategy, and you're looking at Uniprint, you want to do a pilot. Usually what we recommend is those high traffic areas where your providers are traditionally roaming, and pick an area that's usually contained. I mean, I always think of, I think when I was at Meditech or any other area, we said, oh, high traffic, contained, let's look at the emergency department. And so we would recommend that.
Okay, great. So again, you can type your questions in the question box and press send, or you can actually raise your hand and I can unmute you. So next question. How many IT colleagues and devices do you support total?
I'm wondering if that's a question for Brian. Can you say the question again, Alicia?
Yes, and I will actually, it looks like Janie Roberts from Goshen Health has asked this question, and you have your hand up. Janie, is it okay if I unmute you and you can clarify that? So, Janie, I'm going to unmute you, Goshen Health. Okay, you are unmuted. Can you clarify your question, please?
Yeah, our question is, how many IT colleagues in, well, Brian, he's from Tabor, Louisiana, right? How many IT colleagues?
Thibodeau, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
It's
How
okay.
many IT colleagues do you guys have in your, for your facility, and how many devices do you support total within each facility as inpatient and outpatient?
Yeah, so we have about 15 IT employees that's split down the middle between our analysts, our apps, and then the other half would be, I call it operations. That's what I'm in charge of. That'll be help desk, network administrators, system admins, etc. So we're about 15, a bit on the smaller side. Total, we have about 1,200 employees at the hospital. End user client devices, we're right around 1,000. As far as the number of devices actually utilizing this VDI environment, we're right around 100 within the hospital, and then we have probably about 100 docs that access it both in the hospital, at their offices, and even at home as well.
So is your outside offices EMR the same? Like, I mean, they use Meditech, or do you use something else?
So our clinics, we do have around 35 doctors that are employed by the hospital, and we use eClinicalWorks for our ambulatory EMR. Yep. Now the people accessing our VDI environment are those trying to get back onto the network to look up information within Meditech.
And this is a question more for Forward Advantage. Are you able to consolidate that across the spectrum for like NextGen, eClinicalWorks? We also have a Cancer Center product across that same platform. I know you guys work very closely with Meditech, but what about the other vendors?
Yes, absolutely. We should be able to do that. What we would want to do is we would want to have a detailed call to talk about the foreground printing that you're trying to do, as well if there was any other type of Windows printing that you were trying to achieve, and the challenges you're having.
And do you guys have any specific sessions for the Muse conference that's coming up for that?
That's a great question. In terms of an education session, we do not have one now, but we will be at the booth. I'll be there at the booth. We'll have our experts there. We'll be happy to talk with you more about it.
Okay, bring the information because I'll be there. So
don't you fret, we'll do it. I'll make sure that we're prepared.
We want the invite to wherever the fun things are happening this year before we leave. So okay, thank you.
Yeah, and
that's all I was looking for. This is Terry Replogle, actually. I have Janie who was asking my questions, and she's also my partner in crime, and we're actually in a conference room. So we have very specific questions and needs. So I wanted to hop in there and get more. I'm drilling more on the management side, and she's working more on how do we set up and maintain that side. So.
And I had another question, and I don't know if it's for Brian or maybe for you, as far as like the setup within Meditech as far as printers. Right now we do use your communication director.
From like 2003.
Yeah.
I'm sure is that an updated version of the communication director that you guys referenced?
Are you talking about communication director 4?
I don't know what we have because it was purchased. I've been here 6 years, and it was purchased probably 10 to 15 years ago, and it's still what we use, and it's very antiquated and hard to maintain.
Okay, so then we're also going to want to talk to you about and looking at the upgraded communication director platform.
That is most definitely.
I have a note. I know. We have you on there.
So yeah, that was my other. Thanks, Janie. That was the other question we had.
But my question is really like who maintains the whole Meditech backend, like within each module? I mean, how is the setup as far as how is that done? Like, do you just create? Like you said, you had that laser one. So do you like? How did you set up like your procedures and stuff to print like at a certain destination?
So that's actually done on the unit. Chris or Patricia, correct me if I'm wrong, but all we did is define Laser 1 and Laser 2 within Meditech, and then Uniprint actually does the magic in the background. It actually, based off of the client, the name of the client device that they've tapped into, it figures out where to send the job to the printer. And so there's a database you go in and you define if coming from a computer with ICU in the name, then send to ICU printer. So the setup in Meditech was really easy. It was just defining 2 new printers. The magic happens on the Uniprint side.
Right, but then you still have to set up the client as far as the location, correct?
Well,
yes,
you only have one central versus you're going in Meditech now. Right now we go in, we enter the client, then we have to go and attach that. If we want to do each individual location with each individual client, and then we have to maintain that. So you're saying just one and only one is where you would be able to maintain that database.
Within Meditech, yeah, and then you do have to go define the client name and the location within Uniprint, which we did do upon deployment. Now that doesn't take care of Meditech printing is a mess. I've been here 7 years and I still don't understand it all. So that doesn't necessarily, what we're not doing is lab printing and label printing and all that stuff. We're not doing that using Uniprint at this time. I'm not saying it's not capable of it, but we have not deployed that way.
Well, if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah. No, my question will move towards, do you still use a print server process, or are you still in the old way where you are loading all your print queues on each individual Meditech server?
No, we use a print server.
Okay, so we actually have both. So we have it loaded, we have print queues loaded on every single one of our background job servers, as well as we have a Meditech print server that's not being used as a real print server. So.
Gotcha. So yeah, it's Meditech printing is not a lot.
And then we got Uniprint to streamline the actual printing. And can you? Oh, I know what the last one is because I got to get
one last question.
The scripts. prescription scripts, is this handling that for you as well, or do you have to? Are you concerned with? Do you have to be concerned with that?
They're just going to.
We are not currently running through Uniprint for prescription printing. That actually just hits our print server. We have a software called Troy that runs on our Meditech print server that takes care of that for us.
Yeah, it creates your forms and stuff, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All righty.
Alicia, back to you.
Okay. So again, just checking here, I'm not seeing any other questions entered. We actually had a very similar question about working with some of the other vendors, so we have answered that, covered that one. We'll just give it another minute or so in case someone is typing right now, and I'm not seeing any other hands raised at the moment either. So just another few seconds here if you are typing your question. Now, if for some reason you think of a question later or you were not able to ask your question today, you can see on your screen here the number and the email address is displayed, and they will be able to follow up with you. If you have any other questions, you can always email education@museweb.org, and I will work to find the answer for you. So I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that we have recorded today, and so I will send an email follow-up to everyone, including the link to the recording where you can watch the session by video today. Okay, I am not seeing other questions come in, so I want to thank our presenters, Brian and Patricia, today, and thank you everyone for your participation. This will conclude our product showcase. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, bye, everybody.